Hi, this is Kate. I made Rory Gilmore-inspired sweater for my daughter, and this is a video of the process, including the end result. No part 2, all in one video. We wanted it to be soft, so I immediately knew I should look for an extra fine wool mix. However, it was my first time working with a bobbin yarn, or even buying it. I ordered this beauty from Filati Italiani. This cone weighs 1 kilogram. It cost me 39 euros plus delivery. It's 44% merino extra fine, 38% viscose, and 18% polyester. Bobbin yarn is usually thin and requires knitting with multiple strings together, so next thing is turning this bobbin into little cute yarn balls. I got this spinner from Amazon. It cost around 10 euros and I'm happy with it so far. My next step was making samples to calculate my pattern correctly. Here I used 4 threads and knitting needle number 4, but I didn't like the tension there. I think it's too tight. My next try was knitting needles number 4.5, and that was perfect. I like the tension and decided that it will be my main knitting needle size. Once I figured what the knitting needle size is, I made some samples with the pattern I want to use. It's very important to make samples with the patterns that you're going to use because tension for different stitching patterns is different. Take these two samples, one is 16 stitches and one is 20, but their length is the same. Also, it's very important to wash and dry your samples to see if it will stretch up before you spend a lot of time and money on your sweater. My sample didn't change much after the washing, at least not their size. I measured them after I know how many stitches in my piece and how many centimeters they are. I was able to calculate how many stitches are in 1 centimeter for each stitching pattern I'm going to use. This is the sweater my daughter gave me for the size estimation. She wants it to be approximately this size. I like taking clothes as an example rather than body measurements because with clothes you already know how it will sit on you when the sweater is done. I need to know the length from one side to another, and it's around 56 centimeters for the sweater. It's okay if it's 1 centimeter bigger or smaller, as it's not a tight fit and it will not make a big difference. I also need to know the height from bottom to top and from bottom to armpit to be able to calculate the sleeve width. It's 60 centimeters and 39 centimeters for this sweater. I don't care about the sleeve length right now. I will make my daughter try it once I'm making a sleeve and choose the length she wants on the spot. Knowing the knit intention and sweater measurements, I was able to calculate the stitching pattern. I will leave the link to the main pattern below this video. I used some free patterns from internet as a base for a front part with diamonds and simple cables on the sides. And now we knit. Little trick to calculate the length of the end. Right now I'm casting on 10 loops. After I'm done, I take it apart and check what is the size of the end for 10 loops and use it to calculate how long the yarn ends should be for my 110 casted on stitches. Another trick, I like to cast on my loops on 2 knitting needles, and after I'm done casting on, I simply remove one of the needles. This gives my stitches even and nice tension. First knitting pattern is 1 by 1 rip. 1 knit, 1 purl. Repeat until my rip is around 6 centimeters. I use my main knitting needle size, which is 4.5, as I don't want rip to be tight. I only want it for the look, and I want it to be more stretched up than a classic rip, like in Rory's sweater. If I wanted to make it more tight, I would use one size smaller knitting needles. That's what you might notice in many patterns on the internet. Now, after my rip is around 6 centimeters, or 13 rows in my case, I'm placing markers. I do it to make it easier for myself because I'm gonna follow the pattern and it's very easy to make a mistake, but not if I mark my sections. The first section is for knit purl combination, also known as a seat uh, stitch pattern or rise pattern. Second section is for the big cable and small cable. Third is for the central diamond shaped pattern, and fourth for small lace and big lace. Fifth for knit purl combination. After it is marked, I can start with the pattern itself. If you need more detailed explanation about the pattern, please let me know and I will make a more detailed video. After knitting for a while, I actually changed my pattern a little bit. I added small sections between diamonds because that's what Rory's sweater has and I completely forgot to include it. But don't worry, the link to my pattern already includes all the latest changes. And now, knit one row with me. I never knit the first stitch, just place it from one knitting needle to another without knitting to create a nice edge. And our first pattern called seed. One knit, one purl, one knit, one purl, but not like in a rib. In a rib, all the stitches in the line are the same, knitted or purled. For the seed stitching pattern, it's in the chas order. So if the stitch looks like you need to knit it, purl it. And if the stitch looks like you need to purl it, you knit it. And purl, knit. Now we go into our edge, one knitted, and we're at our cable section. In this row, for the big cable, I'm simply knitting 8 stitches. And our background, purl, purl, knit. And in this row, we cross the lanes in our little cable. I do this every 5 rows. I take the extra knitting needle. You can also use the crocheting hook or the special yarn holders. I like to use a knitting needle or crocheting hook. And slip 2 stitches to the extra knitting needle, leave it behind the work, and then knit 2 from the main knitting needle. 1 and 2. After that, we knit 2 stitches from the extra knitting needle. So it's basically the same as doing simple braids. If you never did a cable work and you think that it's hard, trust me, it's not hard at all. It is very easy once you tried it. Here goes our background, 2 purl, and 1 knit. And here's our central part. I purl all the stitches before the diamond edge until 1. So here you can see the diamond shaped edges, they are knitted and the background is purled. When the one left before this edge of the diamond, I put it in the extra knitting needle behind the work. Then I knit 3 of my diamond edge stitches from the main knitting needle, and after purl a stitch from the extra knitting needle. Inside of the diamond is a seed pattern, same as the beginning of the row, 1 knit and 1 purl in the chest order. And now I'm back to the edge of my square. For this side, I slip 3 loops of the diamond edge to my extra knitting needle and place it in front of the work. Then, from the main knitting needle, I knit or purl, depending on which one is next for the pattern, one stitch, and after that knit 3 from the extra knitting needle. Then purl all the other ones that left in the section on the background of our diamond shape. And now another cable. Slip 2 on the extra knitting needle and leave them in front of the work. Now knit 2 from the main knitting needle. Then knit 2 from the extra knitting needle. And our background, purl, purl, and the edge, knit. Here goes the big cable, 8 stitches total, and for this round, the same way as for the cable from the other side, we simply knit 8 stitches. And the last section is a knit purl combination, also known as sit, also known as rice, and it's purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, and we do this till the end of the row. Purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And this is actually the moment when I started to think about the sleeve, how I want to make it, if I should do a small cut with few decreases, or if I want it to be straight and drop shoulder will do the sleeve trick without decreases here. With the help of my cat, I decided not to do decreases here. I haven't done any specific calculations for the neckline. I define where it starts by comparing my piece to the example sweater. Looks like it's time for the beginning of the neckline shaping. I use markers instead of strict calculation, but I make sure that my neckline would be symmetrical from both sides. When it's time to cast off the middle neckline stitches, I don't fully remove the marker, but attach it to the front piece, because I don't have any calculations, but I do want to know where my neckline starts for the future, when it's time to do the other front part and the back, because I do want my backline to be symmetrical. After I casted off 14 stitches, I continue knitting by the pattern till the shoulder shirt rows. I also keep casting off the first stitch from the neckline side in every row until I reach my markers for the beginning of the shoulder. And here I knit it up to the point where I need to do short rows for a drop shoulder effect, so it would have this oversized effect but not look square. I put markers on the places where I'm going to do short rows. Short rows means that I will not knit the row till the end, but till the marker, and every row on the right side would become shorter and shorter. Same as for the neckline, I don't have any specific calculations for this, I just use my example sweater and go with the guts. Looks like it's going to be approximately 8 rows to make this height difference that I see in my example, so I need to do the short rows 4 times. I also mark this row, so when I need the left part of the front, I would know where I started with the decreases. I will also already put markers on the other shoulder with the same decreases, instead of writing down my calculations. And here is my first short row. I knit till the last marker, then I turn my work instead of kneading it all the way, and I knead the wrong side. And this is what I do with all the markers. Let me know in the comments if you have questions or if you want detailed video about the short rows and drop shoulder. Once I have no markers left, I do my last row where I'm kneading till the end together with the loops that I used for turning around. I continue kneading with the pattern till the end. And once this row is done, my right front shoulder is ready. And my favorite way of attaching shoulders to each other is knitting them together with a crochet hook. I will show you how later when it's time to attach the shoulders. But for now, I don't want to cast off the loops because I'm going to use them to attach it to the other piece with the other shoulder like this, but from the back. I don't like to use cable, I prefer yarn. It's very easy and I will show you how. With the yarn, my shoulder loops will not be stretched out and it would be easy to put them back on the knitting needle without them losing the shape. For this, I need similar in thickness yarn, preferably different color from the color of my sweater, so I could clearly see the difference. And if I need to cut it, I would not cut my sweater, so I'm using yellow yarn. I think it's Drops Paris, but I'm not sure. Some of my yarn leftovers. And I use a crochet hook number 3.5. First, just a few stitches with a crochet hook. Then I go through the loop on the knitting needle, pick up the yellow yarn and take it through both loops. And that's it. And that's how I do it. That's how I'm closing this row so I could use these loops in the future. In the loop, pick the yarn and pull it. We always have one loop in our crochet at the end. After I'm done with the shoulders, I decided that my front piece with the cable work is a bit heavy, and even though in Rory's sweater she has this cable work in front and in the back, I decided to make the back a bit lighter and do it all fully with our 6 stitches pattern. So, for the back, I used 95 stitches instead of 110 because this stitching pattern needs less loops. When I got to the shoulders, I did them the same way as I did the front part shoulders, except the amount of middle part stitches was different for the back, as well as for the part of the shoulders because of the different stitches. Now it's time to attach shoulders to each other. I already did one, let's do another one. I take my main knitting needle and start with removing the yellow yarn from my stitches, at the same time putting loose stitches on the knitting needle. If you do this from the right side, it's very easy to remove the yellow stitches. When all of the stitches from one shoulder are on one knitting needle and all the stitches from the other shoulder are on the second knitting needle, I do the same as I did with the yellow yarn, but this time I go not through one loop but through 2 loops. First, second, grab the yarn, pull it. Loop from the first shoulder, loop from the second shoulder, pull the yarn through the loops. Make sure that you place your piece correctly. You do it with your back and front being face to face to each other. So this stitching would be on the wrong side. One shoulder, second shoulder, pull. Once I put my shoulders together, I realized that I made a mistake. You can see that the rib on the front piece is too loose, and as you remember, I didn't make a sample for the rib, so this is what I get. I should have had less stitches on my rib for the front piece, but it's never too late, so I decided I can fix it without pulling everything apart. I just separated the rib zone from the top. I did it by making a small cut at the last row of the rib, and then tearing only this one row apart and catching all the loops left from the front piece. So in the end, I have my main piece without a rip and the knitting needle underneath. And I did that by cutting one loop from the row and tearing apart only one row, the last rib row. Now I'm going to tear apart my rib because I'm going to use this yarn to make another rib, and it's going to be not 110 stitches this time but 95, same as the back piece. I use this yarn from the rib to make a new rib with the desired amount of stitches. I make sure that it has the same height as the rib from the back side and the same height as the rib was before. After it's done, I first tried to attach it with the needle, but I still didn't like how it looked. So I ended up attaching it with the crochet hook using the same method that I used for the shoulders. And I think it looks good now. Let me show you. After it's washed and dried, it will have a perfect shape. Now it's time to mark the sleeves and attach sides to each other. Because I hate sewing knitted parts together, I often cast sleeve stitches from the sleeve hole. So this is my sleeve. I used the example sweater and the marker again instead of calculations. This would be my sleeve hole. Once I decided on its size, I'm calculating the same distance on the other side so it would be symmetrical from all the sides. I make sure that my markers are placed exactly at the same place for both front and back part, for both left and right side, because it's important for the sleeves to be symmetrical. After that, I attach the front part to the back part using the edge stitches and my crochet hook. Because I slipped the first stitch from the left to right without knitting every row, my edge stitches look like a braid. I take half of this braid from one piece and half from the other piece and stitch them together exactly the same way I stitched together the shoulders. It's important to use only half of the edge stitch, so the side stitching would not be massive, but as light as possible. I also place the marker in the middle of this row for both sides of my pieces, just to make sure that I'm aligned. After the front and back pieces are stitched together, the next step is the sleeves. I measure how many stitches I need for the sleeve by comparing its size to the main piece. Then I calculate the stitches of my main piece that align with the sleeve hole. It would be 70 stitches of my main pattern, same as for the front, plus 24 seat stitches. And then I start casting on stitches directly from the sleeve hole. I use half of the edge stitch braids for this, same as for the sides. I don't want it to be more massive than it should be. I also use a space between side stitches and try to do it as equal as possible. The markers that you see indicate where the seat stitch should stop and the main pattern begin. I'm picking up 12 stitches before the marker, 35 from the marker to the shoulder, and the same for the back. I use number 4 hook without a handle. It's comfortable for casting on stitches this way and for slipping them onto the knitting needle. I do this until my last and first stitch meet. Then I work the pattern in circle. I do sleeve decreases every 6 centimeters. I also make my daughter try it on in the middle of my first sleeve work as well as in the end to know the length that she wants. Here I'm already done with one sleeve. The second sleeve is exactly the same as the first one, and I'm almost done with it as well. The last rows on my sleeve are 1 by 1 rib, which is 1 knit, 1 purl, repeat. I use the same size of knitting needle to make my rib. It's 4.5. I do this to give my sleeve a stretched up look, and this is all the yarn that I have left, so I really hope it will be enough. The only thing that's left after is a neckline, so it should be doable. After the rib is done, I'm closing the loops on the knitting needle with the needle instead of casting it off the classical way. I'm going to make a separate video about this. You can find it on my channel. It's very easy and I will explain everything in detail there. Sleeves are done. Now it's time for the neckline. I can remove this marker for now. I don't need it anymore. This is all the yarn I have left, by the way. I take my hook number 4 and start casting on stitches right before the neckline, same as I did for the sleeve, but this time I use the whole edge stitch and the opposite color yarn on the back. I twist the dark color yarn together with my main yarn on the back before every stitch I make from the neckline. I do this so the back would have these visible stitches, which I will use later to knit the second part of this neckline. I calculated the amount of stitches I need to have on my neckline based on my samples that I made in the beginning. Once I'm done with casting on stitches from the neckline, I knit 3 rows with the knitting needle that's one size smaller than my main knitting needle, so it's 3.5. I knit 3 rows like this with the regular stocking stitch, then I will knit 3 rows from the other side as well, and then I'm going to attach them to each other. So now, after my 3 front rows are ready, I leave them on the knitting needle. I take another 3.5 knitting needle, and now you will see why we did what we did with that opposite color yarn. I'm picking up stitches by slipping them from the dark colored yarn to my knitting needle. I don't love doing necklines. It's a bit challenging to remember to twist the yarn at first and then pick up the stitches when they are so tight, but the end result looks very good and it keeps me motivated. If you have any questions or want me to post a more detailed workshop of this method, please let me know in the comments. And all the stitches are on my knitting needle. I need 3 rows here as well. I use purl stitches, so this purl side is facing that purl side. And after I did 3 rows of the inner wall of our neckline, I'm attaching these two to each other by knitting them together. I use knitting needle number 4.5 for merging these 2 rows. And after that, I'm going through 1 loop in the first row and the parallel loop from the second row. Then pull the yarn and I do it till the end of the row. I only have a little bit of yarn left, so it's going to be only 2 rows before I cast off my stitches. After 2 rows of stocking stitch, I will cast off and my neckline is ready. And here is the sweater after everything is done and after I hit all the ends. The last step would be washing and drying. It's a very important step, don't skip it. Your sweater will look and feel different after washing and drying, especially if you used wool yarn or cable work. It's a wool mix, so I will wash it in the wool program of my washing machine with the washing powder for wool, and I will dry it flat. If you don't have a special washing powder for wool, any powder or liquid without softeners or conditioner will work. You can also do a hand wash with regular soap.